this curfew situation has just exaggerated that issue even much more, because there's no escape for them. They can't go out of their houses, and their partners who are sort of inflicting the violence on them have also no other outlet except taking out their anger on their wives or their partners. What I want to talk about is why I personally feel this is happening. Apart from the stress and all that, why aren't these women, something that we say as society, when we hear these stories, we have different reactions. If somebody calls us up for help, if a family member or a friend, or we know something's happening out there, one reaction that we all have is, it's not our problem. So, she should get some help. She should go and ask for some help, but we will not be the ones to help her. I think in this given situation, we are the only ones who can help her, because if she has trusted you enough to call you or to alert you that something is happening, the solution here is not to turn the other cheek and say, call the police, because it's not easy for a victim of violence to do that. She needs to know that someone is on her side. And a lot of the time, what domestic violence creates, or intimate partner violence creates, is this sense of desperation, loneliness. Very often it can lead to self-harm if they feel there's no other escape, if they haven't been harmed enough already. So this feeling of isolation and loneliness is something we as a society can do, can help towards reducing, just by letting people know, we understand that something's going on, we are here, you are not alone, you have someone to talk to, you have support, you have trusted support on your side. Because a lot of the time, if we are undergoing something, it's not easy for us to go to the police, because there are so many things around the system and the structures that will be talked about where that's not helpful. And it is a re-victimization process that society makes us go through as well, because everybody has an opinion on what happens to the victim, or what actions she should have taken. And that's not helpful. That's actually, again, increasing the situation and increasing the mental stress and the distress for the person who has undergone that violence. So I would say, first and foremost, how we can help to address this issue is to stop being judgmental about it, stop giving an opinion on what she should and should not have done, but just simply let her know that you are there. So if you are a family member, care enough to talk to her, care enough to try and intervene with her consent. And if you feel that it is safe to do so, to sort of speak to the other partner, to try and sort of help resolve. Go with her if she needs to go to the police, help her find a lawyer, help connect her with the number of mental health services and support services out there. Because at that point, if she's going through something, she's not going to be in a frame of mind to know what numbers to call, or who to talk to, or how to get about things. So that's one of the problems that we have, is that we look the other way, and this is not the time to look the other way. If at all, this COVID situation has taught us that we need to stay connected and we need to support each other through things. All of us are going through something, some of us more than others. Then the other thing that we have is, we question, why didn't she get any help? Why hasn't she gone to anyone before? So I just wanted to sort of shed some light from my perspective again, is that a lot of the time when there is violence in the home, the victim of the violence also tends to self-blame, because there is a lot of narcissism, there is a lot of emotional violence involved, where when you're subjected to years of conditioning by a narcissist in your household, who has told you, who has belittled you, who has not made you feel worthy, and who has taken away your self-respect. There's a lot of times where this creates something that's called trauma bonding, where the victims are also bonded to their abusers, or there's self-worth problem, where you feel like you asked for it, because psychologically she feels like she had some part to play in escalating that to violence. So it takes, again, somebody outside to have the mindset to support her through that, to understand without blaming her for causing a situation, because that's another thing that we do. What did you do to get him so angry? What did you say? Maybe you should not have done this. Maybe you should not have done that. So, unpacking this and trying to analyze the situation and passing the buck and blaming her, making her feel like validated in her self-blame is also not a solution to helping this situation. As a society, again, it's about understanding what are the psychologies, what has happened to this lady. It's not for us to question. That is for psychologists to do so, and doctors to sort of ascertain what the issue with her and how she can sort of detox out of that is. Our role is to simply speak for her, because she is incapable of speaking up for herself at this point. She is disempowered. She has no ability to reach out and fight for herself, which is what happens when you are an abused person. And everyone, man, woman, child, animal, needs support to be able to come out of something as horrendous as domestic violence. So I'm going to wrap up now, because I think I've talked enough. And yeah, so that's my 2 cents worth of how we can be a society that is more supportive than increasingly abusive towards victims of domestic violence. Thanks.
Thank you, Shanuki. Shreen, over to you. I think you need to unmute your mic, Shreen.
Okay, I'm going to talk more about the structures around us, also how the lockdown, because of the COVID, how it is reinforces the domestic violence and all sorts of abuse that the previous speaker spoke about it. And then also I'll talk about a bit about my practical experience in the last 6 weeks of the lockdown, and how that we are doing remote control operation, and it's dealing with emotions of people and physical harm, sexual abuse, financial abuse, and all sorts of other forms of abuses, which I will bring in an example. But it's not easy, because many of us who have been dealing with domestic violence, in my case 20 years or so, it's like, why are we in this status that we are unable to help these women and people who have done this work? For us to sit back, relax, and watch this happening is really, it's also re-traumatizing us also. Apart from receiving that message of what is happening to another sister, it's also just to sit and think about it, that we are unable to do anything about it, is also another form of trauma. So one of the things that oftentimes when we talk about domestic violence, there is complete denial. And if you carefully look at this lockdown situation, it also safely assumes that home is a safe space and the family is very nice. We are all very safe in our families and our homes. But domestic violence is something that breaks that norm. Home is not safe. Home is dangerous. Families can be violent, right? It's very difficult for people around us, structures around us, to even understand this whole patriarchal way of the society is built in, to think that home is not a safe space, right? So the COVID entire lockdown assumes that everybody has to be at home and you are in a safe space. So the assumption itself is highly problematic. And we have to break that. And it's not easy in a society, particularly a Sri Lankan society that we are living in. The other thing is, the COVID solution is very militarized. We don't have 2 arms of checks and balances, no legislature and also court system. There's an executive president and military solution. So in those contexts, it's all men. I very rarely see in the task force or on TV women sitting in those positions, except our health minister making decisions. So one of a good example is when somebody suggested that sanitary pad is one of the essential service, the task force chief person has told that is not essential service. Right? So we are controlled completely by men, patriarchal men in uniform, who don't understand domestic violence at all. Right? So that is the context. And whereas, like, what is happening to us now, the Domestic Violence Act, ever since it was brought into Sri Lanka 2005, it was a huge struggle, 20 years of women's movement struggle. The structures then and now are completely in denial of domestic violence. You start with the lawyers to magistrate, to the registrar, to the police, to the government officers, to the hospital. Everybody who is supposed to engage in this process is gender insensitive. When a woman comes up with domestic violence case, first question that they ask is whether she has a relationship with somebody else. Right? Even child abuse cases, they used to portray the child as overly sexual. Right? So this is the problem with the society that we are living in, and solution to this problem is on all of us shoulder, but it's unfairly, it's women and women's movement or women's organization or the so-called feminists have to carry this responsibility, right? Whether we are educating the judges or whether we are talking to the police officers or the health officers, probation officers, child care officers, everybody, we have to sensitize. The state, even though brought in the Domestic Violence Act, completely failed to impose the law and also to monitor it, or even to educate the structural people who are involved in. That's why right now we find complete failure of those structures. Right? You go to the police station now, saying that somebody is abusing you at home, police chases you out of the police station. They don't register complaint. I'm telling you because I'm getting lots of complaints from women's groups from the north and the east and Puttalam. The police, the moment they see a woman, even bleeding, they say, go back home. Right? So their priority, their essential service is giving tin fish, rice and paripu, not looking after abused women. So like they are being chased out. So from the police station, there is no record, nothing is getting recorded. Now, this has happened previously also, but at least there is an oversight of women's group that we would go with her. We would accompany her. We would nudge the police female officer here, please record it, right? But that is not there. This woman goes in a vacuum that we say, okay, you're bleeding, just go. They go to the hospital. Right? They are also very scared because of the COVID spreading and all those things. So very rarely we could, push them to go to the hospital. But ideally, midwife system should activate and visit those women. It's completely in a disarray. It's not working. Right? With regard to other structures, say the court. Now, one other thing, very important thing with regard to Domestic Violence Act and women using the Domestic Violence Act is, usually women come to us not asking to punish their husband, right? Always they say, change him. We want him back. And then we also find out that they are totally dependent on those women for economic reason, right? So the problem for them is most often when they come as with the domestic violence cases, they say we need maintenance. So oftentimes our sensitive women lawyers, what they do is, before even they take protection order or even activate the Domestic Violence Act, we go for maintenance. Now, many of those women, now like day in, day out, this is what we are struggling with. They get maintenance from their husbands. Their husbands are either living with another wife or they are not at home or, they are abusive. So the mother and the children have walked out of the house. Now, the court is not functioning. So they don't have maintenance at all. Right? So in that scenario, these women managing it very difficult. And what is happening is there is forced reunion. That these women, in order to get maintenance, they have to just take the abusive husband back into the house. Right? Their protection is completely gone. And also when they go and say that I don't have maintenance to the police, that can you please help me with the maintenance? Police is taking the woman and reuniting the woman with the abuser. And one case in Mana, they did this, and then the woman was severely abused, and we couldn't even get out and rescue her. And the next day morning, we have to send somebody who had a relief pass, the curfew pass, where they were distributing ration. And she was in a very bad shape, and she was bleeding and all. Like, I don't know if she will survive. She's right now in the ICU unit, right? And the same scenario in Jaffna, there was a boyfriend of a woman who was a divorcee, and in the scenario itself is now, for the patriarchal structure, she's a loose woman. She was taken by force in a three-wheeler by her boyfriend, abused severely, and we have made so many complaints to the police stations. They wouldn't do anything till we went to DIG, and there was a police raid, and the woman was taken to the hospital, and the police officers themselves wanted her to withdraw the case because they were trying to protect the husband, right, because of previous deals and all those things. So it's very complicated, because what I'm trying to say is the women's groups have been the oversight group or the checks and balances in the last since 2005, when the domestic violence act got materialized in Sri Lanka, and we have been developing this kind of like oversight mechanism and like a space. And now in a militarized, only executive managing the country, that space, that civil society space is completely gone, and it's very problematic for us to leave it as it is, and I don't know whether we can reclaim this space, because oftentimes in Sri Lanka, in the past, my past experience, war related and all, civil society space has been taken away. And even during the wartime, we managed to address domestic violence issues that was considered a soft issue compared to the other war-related crimes and all. But now I feel even we won't be able to deal with domestic violence cases, because the current government and the militarized structures just don't want civil society space at all. Good example is the COVID task force right now. It doesn't have civil society at all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shreen, for that. We have a bunch of questions, I think, that a lot of people have for you. We'll come to that in a bit at the end of the session. Ransirini, over to you.
Thank you, Shyam. Thank you, Shreen and Shanuki. I think Shreen has really brought to light a lot of practical and contemporary issues we're having with the COVID lockdown and the legal structures of things. I hope to touch on the mental health aspect of the victims of domestic violence, as well as the abusers, and also maybe, as Shanuki mentioned, some of the things that we might be able to potentially do to help those who may be subject to domestic violence. So when we think of victims of domestic violence, or those who may be experiencing abuse in relationships, I think it can be a really tricky thing, and it can take some time for those who might be starting a relationship or a marriage before they realize that the situation for what it is. And I think having seen some aspect of what you loved or found attractive in the other person, it can be hard to reconcile that a person who loves you, or worse, that you love, can do this to you. And I think when we think back on psychology and loss, we know that denial is the first step in coming finally to acceptance. And even if you have realized that you are subjected to relationship abuse or domestic violence or abuse, I think it can be very confusing for several reasons. Most of you might know, but there is this whole cycle of domestic violence, right, where a partner has these explosive tempers and violent incidents, which are usually followed by attempts to be regretful and remorseful, and the abuser attempts to woo back the partner with a lot of affection and charm and apologies. And there's also this, following that, there's a period of calm, where the victim might feel very hopeful that things might change. And it's a lot of confusion. And here, this leads to something called, Shanuki mentioned this earlier as well, but something called traumatic bonding, where you become bonded to your abuser. Now, when we think about how we bond to people, or how we bond to our family and our friends, it's about how there's like an area of, it's about how much of emotions you feel, or how many emotions the other person makes you feel. There is also the time factor, yes, but the emotional instigation by the other is also a factor. Now, in the case of domestic abuse, this, feeling, the period in where you are abused, you feel sad, angry, upset, frustrated, scared, fear, all of that, followed by feeling loved and confused. There are a lot of emotions that are in play. So this can result in, this cycle can result in the formation of very powerful bond that you have towards your abuser, which is very hard to break. And especially if you've grown up in a situation where the violence was a part of your home as a child, this can feel very normal and very hard to break. And if the longer you are in such a relationship also, it becomes further difficult. I was looking up an article and it said about child abuse, but I think it's very, very relative to domestic violence as well. It said that although the victim may disclose the abuse, the trauma bond means that the victim may wish to receive comfort from the same person who abused them. So it's very tricky. And then when we think of the psychological impact of the abuse, we know that physical abuse, most often we can see these people are prone to what we call, accidents, broken bones, bruises, and so on. But also, even when there is physical abuse, there is also psychological symptoms. Vice versa, when there's psychological abuse, there's also physical symptoms that come into play. Somebody who's not being physically harmed but psychologically abused could have physical symptoms such as shaking, feeling short of breath, feeling like you can't breathe, panic, sweating, and so on and so forth. And these can be either short-term or even long-term, ranging from confusion, feeling hopeless, or reduced self-worth, and even dysregulated aggression themselves as well. And long term also you might have anxiety related problems as well as depression, panic attacks. And for those who have been through severe traumatic events, there could be post-traumatic stress disorder or domestic violence acting as a stressor to develop other mental illnesses. And I just want to touch on and just mention that if there are also the long-term physical illnesses or physical issues that might come up if you've been subject to violence and abuse on long term, such as heart disease, sexual problems, sleep problems, etc. And right, okay, so then moving on to mental health of the abusive partners. It's not easy because there is no signboard that says this person will be an abusive partner. To figure out or figuring out what might be going on inside of this person to make them act in such a way. But something that we can think of is that when we are if you've been subjected to a domestic violence situation, or you've been exposed to violence before, you might have learned that, and that could be powerful motivator to engage in violence as well. And I particularly want to just mention that when we think of mental health of the abusers, some of the conditions in abnormal psychology that come into play also are what we call pathological or morbid jealousy, where people have delusional beliefs that your partner is engaging or being sexually unfaithful. So there's a lot of control and isolation and can escalate to violence in the future. Also, Shanuki also mentioned narcissistic personality traits or narcissistic personality disorder, where you have a very inflated sense of ego, you're very superior, so you look down on your partner, and you don't really have any empathy for your partner as well. And the last thing is there's antisocial personality disorder, which is another term we clinically use for sociopathy, where you may have no empathy. You might, it's sort of like the condition we see in this is superior, they engage in lying, manipulation, there's no remorse, and can really harm those around them. One thing I want to, I think, an ending remark is that, especially, I'm just talking about psychological factors, and I really haven't spoken any about the social factors, but especially about narcissism and low self-esteem. I think for heterosexual, especially heterosexual males, in living in social environments where traditional gender roles have been implemented, and if they have low self-esteem and you perceive that your partner might be admired or successful, and you have past behaviors of violence through your family, you might be more inclined towards engaging in domestic violence. Final remark, I think I'm a little bit amiss if I don't mention, but definitely there is mental health interventions out there for those of the victims as well as perpetrators also, because if they're having mental health issues. Yeah, I think I'm going to wrap up there because I'm running out of time, but just want to mention that if you are still stuck in relationship where there's domestic abuse taking place, you can work on building mental resilience. I think I can share some resources as well on that. But if you have left a relationship, there are specialty therapies with, such as for dealing with traumatic events such as EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy and such, that can really help you process the traumatic events that have taken place in your life. I think I will stop there and hand over to, I think, Marini.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will be dealing with the legal aspects of the prevention of domestic violence. Prior to 2005, a woman or any other person subjected to family violence had to grin and bear it. It was considered purely a private family matter, and no one else had the authority to interfere. But due to the valiant and bold, relentless efforts of the women's organizations of Sri Lanka, the Prevention of Domestic Violence Act saw the light of day in 2005. We were sent from pillar to post, but in the end, the then Minister of Justice, Honorable G.L. Piris, presented it in Parliament. This act is an excellent act on paper. It makes provision for the aggrieved party to make an application in the nearest magistrate's court and obtain a protection order if the situation becomes impossible and really dangerous at home. They are supposed to go to the nearest police station or through a lawyer to the magistrate's court and make an application for a protection order so that the perpetrator is kept out of the marital home. This piece of legislation, as I said, looks very good on paper. In theory, it's fine, but there are so many obstacles, even during non-pandemic times, when implementing this piece of legislation. To make matters worse, during curfew and during this pandemic, people have been confined to the four walls, and there is psychological violence, physical violence, verbal abuse, sometimes there may be sexual violence. But what do the victims do? There is very little pro bono culture in this country. How do they access a lawyer? Will the police take down their complaints? The police, I accompanied the victim to a police station and the police were not interested. Police said, you would have been not an obedient wife, that's why you got beaten. And they refused to take down the complaint. And even when finally I persuaded the police to take down the complaint, they were writing something totally different. So how do we get a protection order? Can we access courts? The courts are open for a limited time, and even lawyers cannot travel inter-districts. So island-wide, there is no established, organized system of a network of pro bono lawyers. So what do the victims do? Now, I mentioned earlier that the piece of legislation is very well written. So, under section 5(2), it makes provision for the services of a social worker or family counselor, probation officers, child protection officers, child rights promotion officers to come in. So this is not the time for these people to establish links with the people in the communities. Before the pandemic, they should have visited schools, they should have visited places of worship and network with the people and use this wonderful Prevention of Domestic Violence Act as an educational tool to create awareness of the communities that violence in the family home will not be tolerated. For prevention is better than cure. Instead of going to the magistrate's court or to the police station and asking for a protection order, it's so much easier if you make the home a non-violent zone, because our four main religions teach us these wonderful things. The dignity and worth of the human person is stressed in the Islamic and Christian beliefs that man or woman was made in God's own image and likeness. Then ahimsa, principle of non-violence in Buddhism and in Hinduism, uh, dharma in Hinduism, which means the correct social order, what is right, what is just and right. So all these things are taught through religious values, and it's very sad that it's not practiced at home. So as I mentioned earlier, we have an excellent mechanism. We have a government mechanism which is funded by the taxpayers' money through the treasury. So there's a Ministry of Women and Children's Affairs, there's a Women's Bureau, there's a policy making body called National Committee on Women, there's a Gender Complaints Unit attached to the National Committee of Women, and all these people are fed by the treasury through the national budget. But where are these people? Where are the officers? They are supposed to work from home. And at every district secretariat, there's a psychosocial officer, there's a child protection officer. Where are they? Why aren't they accessible to the victims of violence? It's a sad state of affairs, because domestic violence is a violation of human rights. It's a violation of the right to life. It's a violation of the right to freedom from torture. It's a violation of the human right to equal protection of the law. It's a violation of the human rights to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. So all these human rights are violated. Even during the pandemic, Sri Lanka remains a democracy. Democratic principles cannot be violated. Rule of law has to prevail. Even though curfew has to be enforced in the interest of public health and in the interest in the public interest, right to life cannot be violated. A woman or child violated in the family environment is not leading a decent life. And in the famous Maneka Gandhi case, the Indian Supreme Court said the right to life is the right to a decent life. Not that the government will not kill you, but that you will enjoy a decent life. So if you're subjected to name calling or verbal abuse or physical abuse, or the mother-in-law is using cultural violence on you, where they say, oh, this daughter-in-law brought a bigger dowry and you brought less, that is cultural violence. So all forms of violence can take place within the four walls, and we have an excellent mechanism in place. So as Fali Nariman of the famous Indian jurist said, we the people is the most eloquent set of words in the Indian constitution, and our constitution also has those words. So we the people does not mean in 1978 the people who are there. We the people means the people who are during the pandemic in the year 2020. And I would like to wind up by saying that the state is duty bound to protect these innocent victims of violence who are suffering within the four walls. There is a mechanism in place. Only thing, they have to answer the phones, they have to be accessible to these suffering people and alleviate their suffering.
Thank you, Marini. Sharanya, would you like to take over now?
Thanks, everyone. This is very, very particularly tough act to follow than it is in most panels, I think. And I also just want to acknowledge what a phenomenal panel this is. For me, particularly, Miss Marini was my first teacher in law school. When I started APIC, she helped me organize my first Women's Day event. My activism in Sri Lanka started through her, and Shreen is someone I have watched for years and read and admired. So it's really something to be on. I just wanted to acknowledge that those of us who are younger, we build on the work of women like Shreen and like Miss Marini, who paved the way for what we come. So I just wanted to acknowledge that these struggles that they're talking about are struggles that we need to look at in such a long term, because like they said, Domestic Violence Act took 20 years. So what are we building now that's going to have people sort of have something to work on? Very briefly, I think I just want to touch on the sort of defining domestic violence and understanding what we mean when we say domestic violence. And essentially, domestic violence is also known as you know, a couple of the speakers said, is also known as family violence. And essentially, it's broadly violence that takes place in a domestic setting where the partners or the victim and the perpetrator share a close familial relationship. So this isn't just limited to husbands and wives. This can be from, like Ms. Marini said, often you see this in manifestations of cultural violence, in-laws towards daughters-in-law for cultural reasons such as dowry. You see this from parents towards children. That is an alarmingly common form of domestic violence, of parents who are violent towards their children. You see this sometimes, in fact, from children towards their parents who are elderly and dependent on them. So that's to say that domestic violence is much broader than than just husband and wife. A form of domestic violence is intimate partner violence. And I think that is where a lot of the domestic violence we see and we've been talking about in this particular panel takes place. So in that case, you're talking about violence that takes place where the perpetrator and the victim share more than a familial relationship. It's a relationship of an intimate nature. And this has included different kinds of violence that we've seen. Of course, there's violence that takes place between married couples. It's also violence that takes between young couples. I think Shreen talked about a case of a young girl who had a boyfriend. So that is also intimate partner violence. It takes place between same-sex couples, in queer relationships. And a really common form of intimate partner violence that we've been working on in the last 5 or so years that we're also seeing sort of spike during the COVID-19 pandemic is cyber violence. Is the coercion of, for example, an example of it is the coercion of nudes from young women, the blackmail of young women to share their intimate photographs and pictures by using existing intimate photographs and pictures. And you're kind of seeing it in this setting. You also have manifestations of violence that aren't necessarily physical, as some of the speakers said, and I think this has been particularly challenging. So cyber violence is an example of it, right? Is that for a long time, even now, it's a struggle to get people to view it in the context of domestic violence or in the context of intimate partner violence, because it's not seen as legitimate violence. Controlling of one's passwords, controlling of one's information, using nudes to blackmail them, forcing them to take nudes or participate in the making of intimate videos are really common forms that we see taking place. Another type of violence that also can manifest in domestic and intimate partner violence settings is financial violence. And again, it may or may not include physical violence, but financial violence is also something we've been seeing come up very commonly, is either where you are financially dependent on the partner. I remember a case that came through social circles where the wife couldn't work for visa reasons. And she was given, I think it was something like 1,000 rupees a week for her expenses. And she wouldn't go out anywhere, even when she was invited by her friends' social circles, because she didn't have money to buy clothes. Most of the clothes she had come with had started tearing, they were old, and there was so much control financially. She would, not have enough money to buy food very often because he controlled all of the bills, all of the payments, decided how and when food would be bought. And so you see this control and violence. And ultimately, these are born, as Shreen said, of patriarchal societies, patriarchal structures, and patriarchal ideas and values that are imposed upon men and women in the roles that they occupy, how they should behave, which is where we see the response to this violence coming from. We see questions like, you must have not been an obedient wife. Were you sleeping with another man? Why don't you reunite? Because this idea of family is so sacred and it's so entrenched that we cannot somehow seem to absorb or accept the idea that for so many people, the family is the most unsafe place, right? We talk so much about the violence women face in the public eye, on buses, we talk about, I remember a leading INGO ran a campaign that talked about get her home safe. And the big question was, home is for so many women and so many people the least safe place. And like many of the speakers said, we treated this idea of family and home as sacred, and we seem unable to break our patriarchal ideas, our heteronormative patriarchal ideas, that the family and the home is often the site of the most abuse. It is often the place where women suffer the most. And the last point I think I want to reiterate what was also said is that you can have, like Ms. Marini said, fantastic legislature on paper, right? You can have all of the gender units, the women and children's desk, all of these systems that are put in place on paper only. But that is also symptomatic of a patriarchal society that once again puts the onus of responding to this violence, dealing with this violence, getting themselves out of this violence on the victim. It is the victim's responsibility to access these services. It is the victim's responsibility to prove the violence that happens. It is the victim who constantly has to search for and look for solutions. And it is not the systems that are put in place that ask how people who are most marginalized, most vulnerable, which we know, is women living in poverty, transgender women, sex workers, women who have little to no education, women who have little to no financial stability, who are most vulnerable in these situations, and yet the onus is on them. Like Shanuki said, the first question is, why didn't she ask for help? Why didn't they reach out? And it is ultimately, if we are to move forward in this and get it going, legislation is not enough. It is about addressing those structural, systemic issues which move far beyond committees and move far beyond well-written pieces of legislation that sort of sit there, or sort of conversations of law reform. It lies, as Shreen said, in our attitudes, in the patriarchal power structures that we have in place, and how we raise men and women to think about each other, think about their roles and positions in life. And that is really where this truly sort of stems from. And back to you, Shiha.
Thank you, Sharanya, and thank you everyone on our panel. We had a lot of questions at the time of registration from a lot of people. One question, if we can get to questions that anyone has right immediately, but one question I thought we can just quickly jump into that maybe all of y'all can have a say in is something that everyone wants to know is what can be done right now during this whole COVID lockdown if someone is in a situation like that. What is an immediate solution, or not a solution, but like what can you do right now to kind of ease up the situation a little bit?
Shall I go?
Yeah.
Okay, just from a community crisis response perspective, what we tell a lot of people who call us for themselves or for someone they know is you need to first and foremost get that person into an area of safety. So if she is not safe in her own home, if she's not able to create a distance between her and the abuser, and if she has been trying to sort of calm him down and has not been successful, then she needs to go to a neighbor's house or go somewhere close by. Because of the COVID, she can't go anywhere else. She needs to get out of that. That's the first and foremost thing. So I would say in this particular pandemic situation, we are advising women who are feeling very insecure in their homes to have a bag packed and ready for in case there is an incident. So without waiting for it to happen, if there is a probability, then have a bag ready with 2 changes of clothes to go immediately next door even. Basically create that distance. Immediately inform the police. There's a national women's helpline, which is 1938 is the national helpline that is given out as a sort of a solution for people who need help immediately, and then the police. If you're going to the police, then it is better if you go with a lawyer immediately. And as I mentioned, being a neighbor or being a family member who can come and help out of that situation immediately. If there's something happening, opening your doors to that woman and giving her some space in your home and creating that block between her and the abuser. That would be from my side.
Can I speak?
Yeah.
During, the pandemic itself has actually, I don't know about other areas, but not in the East and Putla, which has frozen the structures at all. So what we have done so far is just getting some curfew passes. Very interestingly, I shared it with you all previously also. The police gave us curfew passes and said, you promise us you won't divide the families. So in order to go and see what is happening to some of the clients who have been forced to go back to the houses, because many of the women get out with their children, and then we have temporary shelters, but because of the COVID they have to go back to their abusive homes and all. So just to do regular visit. The other thing that we have done is opening up our phone numbers, our personal phone numbers, which is, I won't advise everybody to do it. It's not easy. To do little bit of a counseling, and also what we do is top up the phone, because many of these women don't have facilities to call. So sometimes they take the phone from the husband and then there is no money there. So sometimes when they give a missed call, then you need to just top up the number and then make sure that you call them. Pretend that you are one of the friend, and then have access to the lady and ask whether she's okay. And all. And then the other thing is the community network that we have created, particularly in the North and the East Women's Action Network. So we have people in the neighborhood whom the mobilizers, or we call them volunteers, whom they can reach out. Right now, reaching out in the North and the East, government officers and the police officers are highly problematic. They say, now we are very busy with COVID. We can't deal with all these issues. So we need to somehow figure it out how we are going to deal with these issues. But worst case scenario, we do, go to these police stations and all. But then I think we are trying to manage it. That's what I would say. We are managing it.
I just want to add to what Shanuki said as well, and Shanuki said about creating distance and being prepared. I think one of the things, if you're especially trapped or if you're stuck in a situation where you can't leave as you might wish, I think it's the goal might be to also minimize exposure to aggression and injury, and take precautionary measures. For instance, making sure if your abusers are withholding or controlling you by withholding medication, food, and even things like disinfectant, maybe getting the help of your neighbors, having supplies ready elsewhere, and removing potential weapons away. Anything that can be used against you could be removed or kept stored high up or somewhere you can't reach very easily to harm you. And also, when you can remove yourself, create distance. If you can leave the house, or even if you can't, at least go and stay in a space where the abuser can't reach you, even inside the house, or just let the situation in which violence might usually take place de-escalate if you can. and even using things like distractors, doing other things to distract this cycle from coming to climax, more or less. TV shows, special meals. If you can have a neighbor at least come and pop in for a little bit, bring something over just to distract, and because we know that abusers, they might be on better behavior around unknown or other people. So to try and de-escalate it, I think that's something I just want to add in there as well.
I think it's pretty well covered, but I think just also for yourself, kind of keeping a list of organizations or people who may know information, because like a couple of the speakers said, also it's difficult to think in the moment. One is, of course, if you're the victim, but also if somebody reaches out to you. And for us, this is a space we work in, right? So some of this stuff is sort of at the top of our heads all the time, but not for everyone else necessarily. So that helps to sort of keep a database or a few numbers or whatever on your phone. Also to redirect to organizations as much as you can, or people you think perhaps first speak to them, so that they can tell you possible sensible first steps to take. That may help. And also, I think it's useful information to know that some organizations, such as Women in Need, do have clearance now, after some fighting, to work during a COVID pandemic. Like they don't have to sort of deal with the same curfew passes. So also to know who's able to be out there to kind of approach you and help you as much as you can. I think as much information as possible is helpful, so that in that moment, if somebody calls you, or in that moment if it's you have the information in your hand as much as possible.
Thank you, Shanuki, Ransirini, Shreen, and Sharanya for that. Some of the other questions have been about like legal provisions, procedures in place, like what can you do legally in a situation like this, aside from, everything you guys have mentioned. Can maybe Marini, for instance, shed some light on that?
Yes. First thing is you have to access a lawyer, and you have to get legal advice, because each situation is different. Sometimes it's better before getting a protection order, as the others mentioned, to go to a safe place and to go to your own space and reflect on what you want to do. And then later, once you decide to go to court, you have to collect all the documents. And if you are applying for a protection order, you have to get affidavits to strengthen your application. You have to get affidavits from people who witnessed it, or third parties whom you spoke about it, to strengthen your case. And then you have to go to court and with a lawyer. The act says that even a police officer can get a protection order, but from my practical experience, it's very unlikely that you will get a compassionate police officer at this time. So it's best to get in touch with a lawyer and get a protection order if it's an extreme situation, because the lower courts are open and for a few hours, and the magistrates' courts are accessible.
Thank you, Marini. I think one of our viewers has a question about children being affected during this time. This discussion is primarily around violence against women, but maybe we can touch on it a little bit just to cover your question about how children are affected during with domestic violence in this pandemic, and how it will affect his or her education after this. Vimukti, if you're around, would you like to come out and like actually ask a question? Maybe add a little bit more clarity to what you wanted to ask.
I was just thinking that I think Vimukti may be just asking whether what might be the impact of a child who's been exposed to domestic violence at this time, and how that will affect the will that affect the academic performance in the future. I think if you are a child exposed to form of violence at home, I think it is a given that there will be psychological consequences, including issues related to attention, executive attention, concentrations, and definitely academic performance. I hope this answers these answers for the question for the moment.
We had another question. What facts and factors would you say are important for the general public to know so that they're aware of how and in what capacity they may be able to help, especially in the context of COVID-19? Also, are there any publicly available resources which people may be available to use to get in touch with lawyers if they want to issue a protection order or something of the like? Perhaps Shreen or Marini might be able to shed some light on the latter part of that question.
Yes.
One of the thing is we are in a very difficult situation right now. Now, the thing is that some of the women's organizations have established shelters, but many of us who have worked for a very long time don't have established shelter, and we don't talk about shelter very openly, but there is a rotating shelter. So sometime rotating shelter means sisters host sisters. And it's very temporary measure till the case is gone to court, and like if there is other forms of protection available, then we send that person to that protection mechanism. Until that, it's a temporary measure, and we open up our doors for that kind of help. And if anybody is in that stranded position, the problem with COVID is that we can't work across districts, right? So we can't send one person from one district to the other district, but within every district we have small spaces. At least in the north and the east, in Putlam, I can assure if anybody wants protective custody and want to be removed from their house to somewhere within that district, we could do. And I'm open. My phone number can be shared, and we also have some other sisters' phone number in each district where they could help you moving you out. With regard to lawyers going to court, Marini is saying that it's possible, but in the north and the east, priority is different. Even maintenance cases are not taken, and also like we also work with Muslim community. The Qazi court is not at all working. It's nothing to do with domestic violence, but oftentimes Muslim women are sent to Qazi court, and then they are also like the maintenance and all those things are being looked after there, and Qazi court is not functioning. So it's completely no there. With regard to the protection order, very few lawyers are working, and like we also prioritize because the lawyers also have restricted mobility. So we need to kind of like a case by case basis only we are working. With regard to children, yes, because if there is a lot of domestic violence at home and the children are not going to school and they are just staying there with their parents fighting all the time, and then watching all these things is going to cause a lot of problem. And oftentimes child abusers or children being traumatized come to us through their teachers or somebody neighborhood. But now with the lockdown, there is no way to figure it out how, because a child cannot pick up the phone and talk about it. So what do we do with this situation is actually after the lockdown only we will be able to talk about it. I don't want to just talk about issues without actually knowing what is happening to the kids. Unless kids go back to school and then the teachers observe something, or we go to school, proactively talk to the teachers and ask them to observe something, it's very important. The other issue is lots of orphanages, even though they are not orphan, they might have one parent or something like that. In the north and the east, there are these children homes and all. They have been sent back home. So they are in their extended family members' hands, and some abusive fathers and all. Last week, a father actually put 2 children into well and kill. And like there are lots of abuses happening in that spaces as well. There is no monitoring whatsoever. Marini can talk about Child Protection Authority and what the probation officers are doing right now, because I don't see probation officers visiting those places, because these children are sent back home. And many of those children have been in abusive homes and have been sent to these shelters, and now they are back. So that is not systematically followed up.
I have to add that probation officers are in the divisional secretariats and in the district secretariats. And when I contacted them, they said that they are busy distributing dry rations and attending to other things. So they are not doing their specific job duties. They are doing general things that they are entrusted to due to the pandemic. It's a very sad situation, but this is the ground reality.
Shyam, I just wanted to jump in here and say that like there's a really important point that's being raised, which is about priority, right? And we hear this word all the time in the women's movement, is we are told our issues are not a priority right now. So right now, even to, you know, the few people we can reach out to in positions of authority and power, what we're sort of looked at is, it's not that we hate the women and children, it's just, it's not a priority. People are starving. At the same time, women are being killed, quite literally beaten to death. So it's a huge obstacle in accessing justice is the mindset around these issues and how much of a priority it really is. Like Shreen said, we talk about distributing food, which none of us are saying that's unimportant. That's absolutely, but this is as much an essential service as recovering the economy, as distributing food to people, as protecting people from COVID-19, ensuring that all of our citizens are safe, healthy, and living in homes free from violence and torture should be as much of a priority. These should be on task force management lists, and representatives from, you know, women's groups and legal support who work on this should be. And that is ultimately where the problem lies, is because we don't think this is a serious enough issue, and it's always put as a second priority problem. That's just the reality of it.
Thank you, everyone. Anyone else have any questions?
I think there's a question that has before Alina's from someone called iPhone about the fact that sometimes, you know, women are hesitant to leave the house or remove themselves from a situation because they might expose the children to abuse, which is a reality. So I guess it was more of a comment than a question, but then what, is there anything that the panel might be able to think of? Sort of.
Hi, Shanuki, that was me.
Oh, okay.
No, because
hi.
Hi. This is seriously a huge problem we have, and I'm not a huge activist in the area, and I'm talking about people like you know, my domestic help that who've had this situation, who come across a situation where you know, they don't want to. Most of them know they can go to the police. They know that you know, there are shelters, but what they say is we can't leave our children. You know, and for them, patas to take off when they're being abused is also logistically very difficult, because, you know, they have, and you know, most of them have, say, 3-4 children who are like of the same age group. So they're very small, you know, taking all of them, the children have their needs. And this is, I feel, is a huge factor, especially in the urban areas, which kind of, you know, lock women up in this situation where they find it very difficult to get out.
No, it's a fact. It's a fact that that's a very real thing, because I also am aware of a case where there were 3 children, and, you know, obviously when they feel they've been taken out of their comfort zones, the kids also act up because they don't understand what's going on, and it can be very trying on the mother also to try and control that situation if she feels unsupported, if she's doing this alone. I guess the only solution I can think of, whilst it's a very privileged solution and not something that everyone has an access to, is, you know, the family, the community, the neighborhood coming in to support her in a situation like that, where people can sort of take responsibility and help her out with, taking care of the kids or managing them for her, like babysitting or whatever it is that, where they can open their doors to taking them all in temporarily until she's able to get a restraining order. Beyond that, I mean, realistically, I don't know how practical that is for everyone, but kind of the only thing I can think of is the community response that we can have towards situations like that without expecting her to deal with it alone.
Cool. Yeah, that probably is the most sensible thing, actually. Okay.
I had one more question about what strategies you can implement to improve mental resilience if you're stuck in a relationship. Perhaps Ransirini can elaborate on that a little bit.
Hi. Well, I think if you're sort of trapped in a situation when you don't have the option of leaving, because we know the psychological impact domestic abuse can leave on you, is to work on maybe building or working on improving your mental resilience to be able to tackle these challenges. As now the question was brought forward about children being there and then you're unable to really leave. So how do we increase our mental resilience? I think one way, I know that perpetrators, isolate and remove friends, family from you so that they can have more control over you. But we can try and, in whatever capacity, it doesn't matter. It helps somebody be mentally well if you have any type of social connection. It doesn't even matter. Studies show that if you even make connection with a stranger, it could be somebody who comes to your house to sell something, anyone and everyone you can think of, to connect with that person and get to know them. That social connection gives your mood a boost as well, and also allows you to be connected with the people around you. And from the discussion, we can see how useful and how helpful and how much the level of help that we need from the community to also survive when you're stuck in situations like this. And if you are privileged and lucky enough and can attend counseling services, please do, because the counselors can reflect your experiences back, so you can sort of get a better view of your current situation, identify how you are being controlled, and also identify negative thoughts you might be having and work on how to sort of challenge those. And if you can't leave your home, maybe you can engage, especially now with the COVID. There are lots of telecounseling services available. 1390 is the National Emergency Task Response number, and there are psychologists and mental health experts who are willing to speak with you as well. And even if you are stuck, and even if you are facing all these challenges with your intimate partner, family, but we can work on setting and achieving our own personal goals. Education, if you can. I mean, if you're a child who's in a violent situation, or even if you're not, even if you're a woman, you try to empower yourself and educate yourself, whichever way you can, and gain that knowledge so you empower yourself. And also, I think, be gentle with yourself and be kind. I heard also there was mention of you thinking that a person might believe they deserve this, but being more gentle. No, you don't deserve it. You deserve better. And also treating yourself and looking after yourself as much as you can, because you are being battered, possibly psychologically as well as physically. And something also that you can do is to write your experiences. I think that allows you to track what is happening, and also reflect on how have you handled situations in the past, and what has helped you get through these tough situations. And writing, especially with traumatic events, when we, even for PTSD and things, when we think of treatment, it's a lot about processing what has happened to you. And I think writing, even if you aren't receiving help from an expert, writing your experiences can help you process these experiences. And then another thing is that definitely work on, increasing of physical fitness. The link between your mind and body is very strong. You need to, if you're physically strong, the chance of you being mentally strong to deal with what becomes your way is also high. So anything you can do from home, yoga, I don't know, any type of exercise. And there are lots of resources available on how to remain calm and how to remain relaxed when you are in such a situation. You can do relaxation and other stress management techniques. There are a lot of techniques available online now. So if you are privileged enough to access those, or meditation, or any strategy that you can use, because chronic stress, there's all these mental health and physical health components that are associated with having been exposed to chronic stress. And maybe you can rely also on a familiar daily routine that helps your mind sort of calm down and soothe itself. And finally, I think maybe identify or work on identifying your strengths and your ability to overcome adversity and survive.
Thank you, Ransirini. If anyone has any more questions, now would be a great time for you to share them with our panels while you have their attention. If not, we will wrap up this session. So any final questions from anyone?
I think there's a question. Shani has asked a question, and about the financial support. It's only financial support with regard to like victims' access is just, I mentioned about it. It's just child maintenance that they file. You have to file a case and then get child maintenance. Women actually don't get any financial support through the system or structure. I don't think there's any structure in existence. Many of the women that we have dealt with are basically, some of these women even have educational qualifications sometimes. So we need to kind of help them in some form. Some of the women's organization have like something to do with kind of a livelihood support, where they give startup capital to start something small. But I don't see that's for more of a lower strata of the society. But I mean, domestic violence happen everywhere. I don't see much of a financial support for the woman. There is child maintenance, which also takes a lot of time. And oftentimes the husband comes and proves that they can't pay. So they pay minimum, very meager amount sometimes. So that has been a problem. And Sri Lankan government or the structures don't have any support for domestically abused women financially, nothing I know of.
I want to add, Shreen, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, the proposed amendment, there was a redrafting of the Domestic Violence Act that was sort of in the middle of the process. And I know a very strong push for that by the women's groups and women's organizations was to include a component in which there would be a fund for victims to be able to access if they couldn't financially support themselves while going through the process of protection orders and court orders, and like sort of a fund to help women financially support. Of course, like many things, the drafting of the act kind of stalled. It was in stops and starts. If I again, please correct me, but if I remember correctly, it went up to the legal draftsman and then elections happened. And now I suppose it'll go wherever the cupboard somewhere in some ministry where all these acts go to die. The graveyard of redrafted acts it'll go into that. But this was actually, I mean, this is a really important question, because this is something that had, like Shreen said, has been a huge obstacle, and women's groups were pushing for it and saying, this is a serious thing. And it has to be it is one of the biggest obstacles, and we were trying to address it. Now the question is, when will it be priority time again to bring up that conversation?
I think we have one more question. Are there reports of domestic violence where the man is the victim, and is it dealt with the same way? Curious. This is by Nero Puvi. Also, is there an option for the woman to file for divorce citing domestic violence? What is the long-term solution?
Question 1 is if the Domestic Violence Prevention of Domestic Violence Act is gender neutral, So the man himself, but there's only a very small percentage of men who complain of domestic violence because it's a matter of power and control, and the power is always with the patriarch or the male. Then question number 2, it could be desertion. The woman could leave the marital home and then file for divorce.
I also just want to add that there have been cases of male domestic abuse that have come to Bakamono, and it has been, we handle it the same way. And I know women's, there's critique, but in the end, it's women's groups who also supported the cases that have come. It was through women's groups that we supported the cases of male domestic violence. And like Ms. Marini said, all of the acts are gender neutral. They don't specify a gender. So it can be dealt with under those same, and it's going to face the same obstacles also in that way.
Shehan had a question. Do you feel that the national media channels are doing their part to bring attention of the rise in domestic violence?
No.
No.
They can do much more. Create awareness of the legislation, create awareness of the mechanisms available, and push those who are in places of authority, the national institutions, those who are in charge of mechanisms, those field officers, child protection officers, women development officers, psychosocial officers who are in the district secretariats, who are drawing government salaries, taxpayers' money, to push them. And to publish their phone numbers. They have official phone numbers, and I think mobile phones that are paid by the government, by the taxpayer. So the media can highlight those and say, if you have a problem, contact these people, because there is an excellent national mechanism in place to support the legislation that is there. So it's very sad.
I also think that in terms of media presenters, journalists, newscasters, their attitudes and how they present their attitudes to society, that patriarchal narrative, they can address, and they can certainly use the power of the media to kind of demonstrate the, how you should change your social mindset towards women. Simply the way they speak about women on media.
I also think it's particularly interesting in this particular pandemic, with people very openly shouting and saying that this is an issue. I have yet to see a press conference where any of the media channels, while they've asked about prices and task forces and all sorts of things, I have yet to see one, apart from articles in print media, which again are pushed by women's groups who write it and push it and call the 2 journalists we know to publish on a national media platform, or a single political leader, opposition, government, or in between, who has raised this question once and even said, this is a problem. Like, this is a part of the pandemic. This is a problem. It has been nil at the moment.
Thank you, everyone, to all our panelists for being here today and taking the time to talk about a very important topic. I hope everyone watching who tuned in, thank you for coming. I hope you all learned something new. The goal was to kind of spread some awareness about what's happening, educate everybody, and hopefully you all will leave a little bit more knowledgeable than when you came in. This recording will be available later for everyone to watch, and for anyone who might have missed it. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you again, everyone, for coming. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having us. Thank you, Cosmo.
Thank you for having us. Thanks, everyone, for participating. Great question. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.